It is time for today's pre-show of our 220-1102 Core 2A Plus study group. I don't see anything on my screen, but that's okay. You know what I need to do is just refresh that. There we go. That looks good. Hi, everybody. Hi, chat room. Hey, everyone. While you've been hanging out, I've been putting together all of these crazy things that we do to get this stream going. Thank you for being here. Today is our live stream for our Core 2A Plus study group. Got a lot going on. This should be good. Of course, we start at the top of the hour, so we got about 9 minutes to go. Hi, everybody. Hey, chat room. What else is going on here? It's like we just did one of these because we did on Tuesday. It was our Core 1. Now we're back for the Core 2. And then it's in. I want to say, and then we can ease into the weekend, but I don't ease into anything. I have a lot of things to do. I will be spending my time in here, in front of this screen and this camera, shooting. That's what we're doing these days. There's a lot happening. Hey, Mal, good to see you. Thanks for being here. Looks like there's a little bit of a windy thing out there. Looks like it's going to go north for both of us. We got it's that time of the year. That's what's going on. Hey, chat room and everybody here in Liverpool and Dallas and folks checking in from Singapore, of course, St. Vincent, Liverpool, downtown Houston, Texas, California's in, Netherlands is checking in. We got a lot going on. There's Bronx in the building. Hello, Bronx. That is a borough. The borough of Bronx is here. We've got San Antonio. We got Northern Ireland. We got Daytona Beach. Some Florida folks checking in. Hey, Bahamas. Hey, New York City. New York City. We got Maryland, Alabama, Massachusetts, Germany, Clearwater. A lot of folks checking in. Thanks for being here. A lot in there. We got. I like it. There's Clearwater and there's West Canada, which in Clearwater could be Canada at certain times of the year. I know this because I got folks in Canada that come down and see us here in Florida. We got Louisiana. We got Ohio twice. Wow. There's a lot going on today. Thanks for being here, by the way. If you want to connect with Vevox, I guess we can get you plugged in here. Why don't we do this? There we go. You can join up and put your pin in the map, and we can kind of see where you're here from. It gets kind of close. You can kind of figure it out, see what's happening there. I am working on making sure all of this craziness is set up and working. I can't say that I'm successful all the time, but so far so good today. More Florida folks. We got folks in Long Island, Atlanta, and the Ivory Coast, in Toronto, and India, and San Antonio, and Nigeria, and Atlanta, and South Africa, and Sheffield. We got Denver, and New Jersey, and Ecuador. We got Port St. Lucie. A lot going on. There's Maine. I need to get back up to Maine. I had a good time in Maine a few years ago, just hanging out. There was just, you just go out by the water and you just watch it. You just hang out. And so interesting to do that, just to relax. And then you go back to work. Then you go back to doing things. Hello, Nigeria and Somalia and Saudi Arabia and London, UK. Thank you for being here. We got all Core 2 today. Core 2 is going to be a lot to go through. There's the folks checking in. We got some folks over on the west side of the UK. We got folks checking in from everywhere. Thanks for being here. Port St. Lucie. Need to get back down there too. Hang out. We'll have to wait till spring hits, till the beginning of the year. Although I guess it's getting pretty busy there now, I would think. It's starting to ramp up. South Florida ramps up during the winter. So season has begun. Once you hit Labor Day, then kind of season kicks in. 5 minutes to go. 5 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. We'll get things going. So we got all Core 2 today. This will be pretty good. I've got all new questions. Vevox is set up. Cameras are rolling. Are we recording? I think we are. Yes, because I already did my podcast. I got rid of the beeping noise from Tuesday. Completely gone. Never going to happen again. That was a thing. That's always bad when there's something in the studio that starts making noise in the middle of something. That's not what you want. So I took care of it by completely removing it. Sometimes that's what it takes. Later on, I'll put it back in. I got things to fix. So it's one of those. But we'll get there. I think tomorrow I'll be fixing that. Give me something to work on. All right, 4 minutes to go. We've got audio looks good. Videos are good. I'm checking my views here. Those look okay. I think we're right. I think we're okay. I think we can actually do this today. I have been setting up here. I usually set up about 2 hours before. I turn everything on, move everything into place, because these screens that are in front of me are not where they normally are. Normally, they're on these nice arms, and I can bring them here and turn them and move them. And things are a little bit closer, and so it takes me a while to kind of push things back, put the cables, the earpieces in for the headset I'm listening in on. I've got make sure the mixer is working, get the videos switcher up and running, all of those things. So we're getting there. We're going to make it happen. I need to get a lower third for the Vevox stuff, don't I? So I can just have it at the bottom. That's just always there, or something I can put on and off. The problem is that I've got this relatively old video switcher. In the world of video switching, I guess this one is now approaching 6-7 years old. Maybe it's not that long. Maybe 5 years. In any case, I think it's longer than that. There's newer video switchers out that have different options for the layering of graphics and things. I'd have to do some fancy work here to make everything that I wanted to work do that. So it doesn't work so well when you're working through the details. But I'm looking at perhaps getting another video switcher to do something like that. It's sometimes difficult though, because I want all of the fancy bells and whistles. And turns out, whenever you want bells and whistles, they want to charge you for bells and whistles, and then that runs into a completely different set of problems. So we'll figure out how it goes through. I agree. It's running. It's working. Things are okay. There's just other things I could be doing over the live stream, working through that. Oh, there is a lot to go through, though. I put these Core 2 questions together over the weekend. They're, of course, all new questions every time, but it's good because I often will hear things throughout the month or people ask questions, and then I think that would make a really good question for the study group. And so it goes right in there. Make those happen. We got 2 minutes to go. I think that's up. I think we're in pretty good shape. I just need to shift how things are looking on this side. Internet looks good. It's hard for me to see it from here. Here we go. Internet looks good. Just adjust all of the cables and wires and stands, and we'll make it work. It's now just a well-oiled machine. We just now need to keep it going, keep the party going. Okay, and we got folks in the chat room. Ricardo says, passed my 1101 last week, have the 1102 on Tuesday. So this is a nice run through. We'll do some Core 2 stuff. And this will be a good one to work with. All right, we got about a minute to go. Let's get Keynote up. We're looking for a green light on the Keynote. Come here, Keynote. I need to get this closer to me. There we go. That's a little better. Yeah, I can reach it now. It's right in the way of the mouse. That's as it should be. That's what it always is. That's why it's over there, so I don't knock it with this ginormous mouse that I have on my desk. It does take up a little bit of real estate, but so worth it. All right. That is good. I'm looking at times. I'm looking at, why is that? Oh, good. Okay. So now I can actually watch the countdown now. Let's get graphics in place. Let's get that started. Look, that's me right there. How about that? I think we're in pretty good shape. Yeah. All right. Well, with that, it's just about ready to get started here. We'll get the last few things set up. Graphics are good. In fact, graphics should be that one. Very nice. This is September, isn't it? It is. And I think it's time for live stream. Why don't we do that, everybody? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2023 Professor Messer 220-1102 Core 2 A+ study group. This is our study group where I ask you questions that come directly from those CompTIA exam objectives. And then you, if you are here live in real time, can join us and answer the questions along with what we're doing. So this is a great place to be if you are studying for your Core 2 exam, or really any of the CompTIA exams. There is plenty to go through. To get you started, if you are here live, we would love it if you joined us on Vevox. Let me bring up a better view of that. There it is. There's Vevox. This is how you can answer questions in real time as we are going through this today. Pop open a new browser window and simply browse over to professormesser.com/QA. There's also an app for this. It is the Vevox app. You can find it in your favorite app store. And when you go there, you will look for a session ID of 125-386-042. And if you do that, you'll be able to see the questions we put up on the screen. You'll be able to put questions in for the after show, which is also important. So all of those are available in Vevox. But there is a question in Vevox that will be waiting for you. We're going to set up a question right now. And this question is one from last month. So when we speak of last month, we're talking about one question we always do so that you can get into Vevox, try it out, make sure everything is working. The question today asks, a system administrator would like to automate a change to the Windows registry on all desktops. Which of the following would be the best way to perform this task? Would it be PY, SH, JS, PS1, or VBS? Now, the standing rule that we always have in the study groups is please don't answer in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA or use the Vevox.app link that is on your screen, and that will get you into answering what this question happens to be. And we'll talk about this in just a moment. We will come back to this in just a moment because we have a few things I would like to talk about and go through before we do that. Let's go past that question that we have. There it is. And I think one of the things that I love doing these live streams is because there's always something interesting we'll talk about. There's always, the chat room is providing more details. This is a great place to be. But of course, we're not always live. And one of the things you can do is join us when we are not live by either subscribing to our YouTube channel, professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have daily pop quiz questions for the A+ exam. You can find those on the thing that used to be called Twitter, professormesser.com/Twitter. And there's also the same version of that question, but with a pretty picture over on professormesser.com/Instagram. Great places to go to join us on the media that is social. We also want to let you know that we are going to be talking today about the 220-1101 or the 1102, but obviously the A+, you need to pass both the 1101 and the 1102. These exams were released on April the 20th of 2022, which means they'll probably retire somewhere around November 2025. We don't have an exact date yet, but as we sit here in September of 2023, we have a lot of time before we ever get to that point. The point that I'm making with this is don't worry about the dates. You're good. As long as you're studying for the 220-1101 and the 220-1102, you're in good shape. That's where you need to be. The exams themselves are 90 minutes long. For the 220-1102, you need to get a 700 score to pass the exam. This is on an interesting scale between 100 and 900. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I think that's by design. It's to keep you on your toes. There's no way to reverse engineer the way that they grade, and they don't tell you how they grade. So it's interesting they even provide you with a score because ultimately you don't have a lot of control. Best thing you can do is do the absolute best you can on the exam and let the grades take care of themselves. Once you pass the exam, you're in good shape because you will be certified for 3 years regardless of what happens with any exam expirations or anything else or retirements. So that's an important consideration. You need that 700 on a score from 100 to 900 to pass your exam. The Core 2 exam itself covers these topics: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. There's a lot in 4 single domains on this exam. We will probably have questions that come from almost all of these, probably all of them, during this live stream. When we are not here live, or if you miss the live stream, you can always watch the replay. It's available on YouTube immediately afterwards. And I tend to post a podcast audio only version generally the day or the next day. So within 24 hours, you'll certainly have one suddenly appearing in your podcast listening program. If you'd like to find that in your podcast listening program, you may need to add it manually. You can find it at professormesser.com/podcast. Or if you're already on a streaming media service like Spotify and the others, you can just search for Professor Messer. You'll find it there as well. There is that YouTube replay I just spoke of. One of the things you'll notice on the YouTube replay is that right after about a day goes by, magically almost, you will see that a list of timestamps suddenly appears in the YouTube video description. And this is not something that YouTube does automatically. This is something that my marketing manager, Lori, hi Lori, she's watching the replay. All of this is going by probably at 2x speed. I'm probably talking this fast when she's watching the replay. And if she goes through this and puts all these in here, now you can click on the timestamp and go directly to what you are looking for in this video. So that's another good way to find things very quickly, to jump around. Maybe you think, I heard a great question on that study group a couple of months ago. Well, now you can find it very quickly in this list. Thank you, Lori, for that. If you like what Lori's doing with that, give her a heads up in the chat room. She watches the chat, the live chat replay as it's going by as well. Let her know that all of her work is something that people are able to use. And we've gotten some great feedback about that too. Well, when we're not here on this live stream, we are also in our Discord. Discord is a chat service, one that we can all join in and talk back and forth about the things that you are studying. There's also other folks in the Discord that start up their own study sessions. If you're looking to join a community of like-minded folks who are trying to earn these certifications and learn from each other, it's a great place to go. You can join us at professormesser.com/Discord. I will also let you know that eventually you will need to buy a voucher, or you'll need to pay for your exam. You could, of course, go to the CompTIA website and pay full price, but why would you do that when you can simply go to professormesser.com/vouchers and get a discounted voucher? It's already there if you live in U.S. or Canada. Unfortunately, outside of the U.S. or Canada, I don't have any discounts for you. I am so sorry. We're trying to figure out a way to do that. It's not easy. It's relatively complex, as if they intended it to be. In any case, though, this is a great place to get a discounted voucher if you live in the U.S. or Canada, and it's already discounted. You don't need a code. You don't need to install an extension into your browser. You don't need to visit some third-party website. They're just already discounted. It could not be easier. Not only that, but I am also giving you something else that you can't get anywhere else. It's my Exam Hacks ebook. It's a book where I put together all the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years of taking these many certification exams. And this is a way that I've summarized everything into something you can read through very quickly. It very well may get you a few extra points when you're in the exam yourself. Find out about all of this on my website. Go to professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked earlier. The question was all about a system administrator would like to automate a change to the Windows registry on all desktops. Which of the following would be the best way to perform this task? Would it be PY, SH, JS, PS1, or VBS? So you're probably already noticed that these are scripting languages, scripting systems. So we want to find the right one for this task. I'm going to stop the polling and let's see what we answered. We can see that PS1 is 48% of the answer. SH came in at 20%. We've got VBS at 13%, and then PY and JS are both at about 8%, almost 9%. Well, those of you that answered PS1, 48%, almost half of you have that one. Well, you're absolutely right. That is Windows PowerShell. And if you are trying to automate some type of process, especially a process in Windows that deals with things at the operating system level, like changing a registry, this is a great tool to use because it is specifically designed for people who need to administer Windows systems. This allows you to get into the details of services, the Windows operating system, and other information down there at the lowest level of the OS. This is a very useful and powerful scripting tool. That's why I often tell people, if you want to have a skill that employers would love to see on your resume, being knowledgeable in PowerShell and or being knowledgeable in Python are two of the most highly coveted skill sets for technical people today. And if you are looking to get an extra edge or to position yourself a little above other folks who are applying to some of these jobs, learning more about PowerShell, learning more about Python can be very, very valuable. In this case, because it was automating a change to the Windows registry across every desktop that you've got in the entire place, I think PowerShell fits very well. And the extension of the file that is normally associated with PowerShell is PS1. And that's why PS1 was the right answer. We have 20% that say .sh, which would be just the shell script. Shell scripts are generally associated with Linux and Mac OS. We don't generally call scripts running at the command line in Windows shell scripts, although technically they are, but we never refer to them that way. We refer to them as batch files. BAT. It's kind of something that was held over from the DOS days. That's what we originally called them back in those days. But in this case, shell scripts or .sh is something that is almost always associated with Linux or Mac OS or similar. We also have Python. I've already mentioned that Python is a valuable scripting language, but it doesn't automatically provide you with an automation at the lowest levels of the Windows operating system. So perhaps not the best way to perform this task. Could it be a way to perform this task? It could, but that wasn't the question. The question was the best way, and PowerShell, better than anything, can handle this particular task. Would not be JavaScript. JavaScript allows us to modify or control things that appear in your browser, and VBS, the Visual Basic Scripting for Windows, is commonly associated with Windows applications, like automating functions within Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word. There are some also general scripting functions within the Windows operating system, but nothing as good as PowerShell, especially if you're looking to modify something at the lower levels of the OS. And that's why in this case, PowerShell is the right answer. So if you answer .ps, those 48.35% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, let's see how we do with the next one. So going forward now, all of the questions we have in the study group are brand new questions and things you have not seen before. So the first question I have for you then is it's not a multiple choice based question. You know, the question we just had was a question with multiple answers that you could choose from. So even if you didn't know the answer, you had a 20% chance of getting that one right. Instead, one of the things you'll see, especially when you first sit down in the exam, is there will be a series of questions at the very beginning. Generally, it's a handful, between 3 and 5, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And you will find those questions are very different than a multiple choice question. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions, PBQs. And those performance-based questions are simply anything but multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could be putting you at a command prompt. They could be putting you on a Windows desktop. They could be asking you a matching question, a drag and drop question. It's the same information you've already studied. It's just asked in a different way. So as long as you know the content from your exam objectives, you're going to do fine. And I have for you, of course, a brand new performance-based question. We always have a brand new one with every study group. And so I have one for you today. Let's see how you might answer this one. The question is, from the command line, display a list of all connections between this computer and other devices. And I want you to be able to put in the answer into your Vevox. This is really a fill in the blank to be able to do this. If you would like to be able to make that happen, there's your connection. There's the Vevox connection there that you can make. From the command line, display a list of all connections between this computer and other devices. I'm looking for what you would put in at that command prompt. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, we're going to plug everything into what we're doing on the screen here. We even have the Vevox QR code. It's on the left side of the screen here. You can always click on that as well to get you into Vevox and answering this particular question. What would you use? What would you type in? And then we will look at what I typed in to see what I got and see if it matches what you got there. The question again, from the command line, display a list of all connections between this computer and other devices. See if you know what it happens to be. This is one where you do need to know the command line. Command line, there are, gosh, in the Core 2 exam, I guess there's about maybe 10 or 15 command lines, command line commands, utilities that you need to know. They're pretty good. So see what you know about this one. What would you type in? We're looking for a single command. We don't need multiple commands to make this happen. I just want to type in one thing and display a list of all the connections between the computer that I'm on and the rest of the world. That's effectively it. So this is, I guess in a way, having it as a fill in the blank. This is effectively what this is the same thing as kind of a simulation type of exam. So I think that's one of the best ways to approach this, is having that simulation and being able to work through it. See if you know what this one is. Not all questions on the exam are simulations. Many of the performance-based questions are matching questions or questions where you would drag and drop. I think a lot of people overthink what could possibly show up as a performance-based question, and they come back and say, I took the exam. I was really worried about those, when in fact, it was sort of normal. So that's the situation that I think you should go with as well. Don't worry so much about these questions. They're not there to trick you. They're there to see if you know the content from the exam objectives. So go back to the exam objectives. They'll tell you everything you need to know. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, from the command line, display a list of all connections between this computer and other devices. And you should be able to open up a command line. Interestingly, the answer to this one works exactly the same whether you're in Windows, Linux, or Mac OS. So this is one of those commands that fits almost any operating system. And to have this work, what you should have typed in to make that work is netstat. Netstat is the command we were looking for. It is an abbreviation, hard to believe, for network statistics. Not that difficult, is it? And it works across all of these different operating systems. There are even flags you can add to it, but it's not so incredibly important that you do. If you want to see all active connections instead of all connections altogether, you can filter out just the active ones by putting a -A. You've got netstat -B in Windows anyway. These flags are a little bit different between operating systems, but in Windows, if you are working at the command line with an elevated prompt, you're in an administrator prompt, then you can do a netstat -B, and it shows you the connections and then shows you what binary running in Windows is using that connection, which can be really, really useful, especially if you're trying to track down an annoying, noisy application or perhaps even malware. You can find that, have it on those views. And netstat -N just shows IP addresses. The default is to have it perform a DNS, reverse DNS, so you can see all the names. If you were simply type in netstat at the command line, this is on my machine, this is a bit redacted. That's why the IP addresses look a little bit wonky. Those are not good IP addresses. Those are super weird because I deleted stuff. So there is plenty there. I just did a netstat. Now, if you did netstat -A or netstat -B or netstat whatever it happens to be, I would accept that as well. That's perfectly reasonable. You get full credit as long as you have netstat in there. That is the important one. That's what we were trying to know, is to understand a list of all connections between this computer and other devices. Netstat will do it. Look at all these. This is a list. All of these happen to be, I got it right at the beginning of the information that was flying by, but it's all IPv6 on my machine, but that's okay. It looks exactly the same with the IPv4, just the IP addresses are a bit different. This is a redacted view of the last part of the IP address, and then you'll notice there's these larger numbers right at the end, 50,178, 50,166, 50,165, 164, 163. Those are your port numbers, your local port number. Most all of these are going out. I think in this case, it's all HTTPS. They're going out to other services via HTTPS. And as it's going out there, some of them are done. Some have got the last acknowledgement. You can see exactly where the connections are between this machine and the machine out there. NetStat is very powerful at being able to make that happen. So if you thought that was the right answer, some folks in the chat room were talking about ARP, which shows MAC address to IP address resolution, but that's only for devices on your local subnet, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an active connection of any kind to that particular IP address. So it's not going to give you a list of all connections between your computer and other devices. I want to see every connection. In fact, many of these connections are from the same IP address to the same IP address, but you notice there's different port numbers in use on the sending side, and that's because there were multiple connections. When you start your browser starts up and a lot of different connections are going back and forth. The way that you can see that, NetStat. It's a great way to see it. So I think that's a perfect way to know how to approach or view all of those many and varied connections from your device to another. And it's a good way to make sure, am I getting out and communicating to that device? Are people communicating inbound to me? Is another one to consider. So there's lots of different options to pull from there. NetStat, incredibly useful. It's one of those where I think of NetStat sort of like the Nmap, where Nmap has 100 different options available to it. NetStat is very often the same way. There's so many different types of options available that you can really customize it and get exactly what you're looking for. If you answer NetStat, you got that one absolutely right. I'll give you 100% on that one. Well done. Well, let's do another question. I've got one for you. This next question asks, we're back to multiple choice, by the way. This multiple choice based question asks, a computer's clock slowly becomes inaccurate. A computer's date and time clock slowly becomes inaccurate over time. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Would it be to update the time zone, disable hardware acceleration, upgrade the RAM, perform a startup repair, configure an NTP server? I guess many of these could be an option. Let's see which one you think the right answer might be. A computer's date and time clock becomes inaccurate over time. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Is it update the time zone, disable hardware acceleration, upgrade the RAM, perform a startup repair, or configure an NTP server? Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer, or you can use the Vevox app information right in front of you. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We will figure this out as we go along, but we need to answer in Vevox, this system that's on your screen right now. We'll figure out the details with all those. I think if you're someone who is managing sort of the process of getting a system running and making sure that it works optimally, this is something you definitely need to be aware of and familiar with. So please have a look at what different options are on the screen and then choose the one you think might be the best one to fix this particular problem. Hopefully it's maybe this situation you found before. Maybe your system has a problem. In fact, if you were here on Tuesday, did I speak about a problem like this? I'm trying to remember. But lots of other things you can work through. See if you know the answer. Lock it in right now. I'm noticing the numbers are going up pretty quick. It makes me wonder, do we all know this one? Have we got this one? Are we good at putting this in? If you want to answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, the link on your screen, or follow the Vevox app that's on your screen. Either one of those. They both go to the same place. If you have the app, though, you may need that ID. You will need that ID to be able to figure out the details. Let's see how you answered this one. The question again asks, a computer's clock slowly becomes inaccurate over time. Which of the following would resolve this issue? Would it be to update the time zone, disable hardware acceleration, upgrade the RAM, perform a startup repair, or configure an NTP server? Let's stop the poll and see what you answered. And you can see 46% of you say configure an NTP server, 31% say update the time zone. Then you have 11% that said perform a startup repair. Then there's single digits, 5% for disable the hardware acceleration and 3% for upgrade the RAM. So this is one where you've got a clock, it's in your computer, and it's slowly losing time. It's only a couple seconds slow in the morning, and then it's a few seconds slow at the end of the day. By the next day, it's 5 or 6 seconds behind. And then as the week goes on, you get a minute behind or even more. And you're wondering, why can't this system stay up to date? There's many reasons why that could be. The issue we're really dealing with when we're talking about this problem is time drift. That's what's happening. And this is not unusual for these types of technologies, especially the way that our Intel-based architectures work, is that there might be times when the system itself needs a higher priority or takes priority away from other things happening in the system. And because of that, the clock slowly begins to get a little slower and a little slower and a little slower. We don't commonly see this. Really, we would, I guess we could redesign the entire motherboard so that it wouldn't do that, but that's not very practical whenever you work through those problems. On Windows, you've got the option for enabling an automatic time setting. This is the process in Windows, but the same functionality is in any operating system you're going to run into and be able to work with. So that's not, that is the issue that we're trying to solve, is how can we have this system constantly update the clock to always have the correct time on it. So instead of fixing the problem, we're effectively fixing the symptom, which is something we commonly don't do in technology. Normally, we go right to the root cause and we fix it. But in this case, fixing the architecture that we use on a PC, not very practical. So instead, because of the type of problem that this is, we fix the symptom. And the symptom is to enable automatic time setting. Have settings in Windows, it's setting, time and language, date and time, and you can configure it to automatically update itself on a very regular basis. Maybe every day it updates the clock, and you can configure different things. Here's a better view of this picture of this dialog box that pops up. You can set the current date and time, and there's an option. It's very innocuous, just says set time automatically. That's it. Set time automatically, and in most systems, by default, this will be on. Now, underneath the surface, what you've really just done is enable NTP, or the Network Time Protocol, and Windows handles it from here. Windows has its own servers it will go to. I think it's time.microsoft.com in the case of Windows. In Apple, it's time.apple.com. So it depends on what server you're going to. And you can update and modify those. I think most of those are in the registry settings, but there's other places you can set that. And so the time is a big important consideration in making those happen. The other interesting part of this is that you really don't control it in Windows. You just turn it on, you're good. So that makes it very easy. Now, you may have in your network, maybe you're not able to use Microsoft's time server. Maybe on your network, you've limited out the traffic that goes outside of your organization, and you want to have your own time servers. And you can certainly do that. You can configure your own Network Time Protocol server, NTP server, and that will do effectively the same thing, where now you have a time server that you can have all devices on your network reference. They will all maintain the time, and you'll no longer run into this situation where you sit down at a computer and it seems like it's a little slower than it has been. Well, now we know the time is going to be updated periodically. You should sit down every day and see an accurate time because you've configured NTP to point to your NTP server that is local. Now, the other options here were not the correct answer. And why weren't they? Well, let's step through them. We did have about 31%. So almost a third of you said, we'll update the time zone. Well, our problem was not that the time was showing the incorrect time or by number of hours. So right now, if it's 20 minutes after the hour, it's 20 minutes after noon where I am. Well, it's 20 minutes after 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or any other time where you happen to be. So setting your time zone would tell the clock the proper way to present the time, but it would not help you with time that was slowly being inaccurate longer and longer around. So updating the time zone is not going to be the correct answer. We've got 11% that said perform a startup repair. Our problem here has nothing to do with startup. This has to do with the clock working properly in the system and making sure the clock is updated properly. So that is also one that we have to throw out as not being an accurate question either. Disabling hardware acceleration isn't going to help. In fact, hardware acceleration would make the system run more efficiently, but that's not really going to cause your problem with the time clock. And then you have upgrade the RAM. Upgrading the memory in the system will allow you to execute more applications at the same time on your desktop, have your system run a little bit faster, more efficient, but it doesn't change the clock. So in this case, upgrading the RAM is not going to be the right answer. The only answer of this list, because indeed it did ask you, of the following, which one of these would resolve the issue? Of the following, the only one that would resolve this issue is the one in the bottom that 46% of you chose, configure an NTP server. Now, are there other things that could have been done? Pretty much no. This is sort of how the way these systems work. That's why whenever you install Windows, it just automatically is set up with NTP. When you install Mac OS, it automatically runs with NTP. Same thing for Linux, because all of the operating system manufacturers know that they're running on hardware that will eventually become inaccurate. And why not have everything up to date with the latest time by configuring NTP and making sure that it is pointing to a valid NTP server? So that is how you would make that happen. So if you did answer configured NTP server, you got it absolutely right. Let's do another question. I've got this one. And it asks, a technician at headquarters is controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it VNC, MSRA, RDP, SSH, or VPN? Well, these are 5 things to choose from. The question again, a technician at headquarters is controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it VNC, MSRA, RDP, SSH, or VPN? If you think you know the answer, follow the links on your screen, go to vevox.app, use that ID, or simply type in professormesser.com/QA, and you will be able to find that question and answer it right now. A number of you already answering this one. The number went up real fast. So we'll have to see which one you think is the right one to choose from. Maybe you know. Now, as you're doing this, by the way, there should be a tab there. If you have questions for the second hour in your Vevox app, you can always flip over to that tab and put in any questions that you might have. We can talk about all of those as you go through. You answered that one so quickly that I think I would like to jump in and see how you did. So let's do that. The question again asks, a technician at headquarters is controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it VNC, MSRA, RDP, SSH, or VPN? Let's see what you answered. We're going to stop the poll and see your answers. 35% say RDP, 29% say VNC, 25% say SSH. Wow, we got a lot going on here, and we aren't quite sure which it is. It's almost a 3-way tie for first place. We'll have to figure it out. We also got 7% that say VPN and 2% that said MSRA. So I think if you start looking at the details and breaking down what the differences might be with remote desktop, we should probably consider remote desktop and what it is to begin with. As this question clearly stated, a technician is controlling the desktop of a Windows server, of a Linux server, excuse me, at a remote site. So they are controlling the graphical front end, that graphical desktop that you would have on a Linux device. So we are definitely doing a remote desktop and working through there. Now, there's different ways to control a desktop on a remote system. If it's a Windows system, we can use the Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol, or RDP, and simply connect to the Windows device and control it using those set of protocols, very often through a remote desktop app that is in your operating system. And there's lots of operating systems that support using RDP as a client and connecting to an RDP server, which is the device that you're controlling. If you are in a different operating system other than Windows, well, you don't have the luxury of the Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol, because that protocol is for Microsoft products. And we are not connecting to a Microsoft product. We're connecting to the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. Because of that, we have to use a different technology, but fortunately, it's one that's very similar and it's open source, called Virtual Network Computing, VNC. It uses a protocol called the Remote Frame Buffer, or RFB. And you can find VNC, both clients and servers, available for practically any operating system. So that's pretty useful to know. So if you're connecting to Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and others, there's probably a server available that supports VNC. But since here we're talking about Linux, the question specifically asked, a technician at headquarters is controlling the desktop of a Linux server at a remote site. So we already know it's not going to be RDP. That's just not an option for what we're doing. That we know we can throw out. So unfortunately, when you're working through the details of these questions, you do have to make sure that you're using the right one and being able to work through the right answer. And RDP, because we're connecting to the desktop of a Linux server, RDP is not an option. Also, because we're not connecting to the desktop, or we are in this case connecting to the desktop, SSH, however, although 25% of you chose SSH, SSH allows you to control at the command line of that remote device. So that's not going to help you either. We're trying to control the desktop of that Linux server. So that one is kind of nice to have that option there. SSH, though, only at the command line, so that's not going to help us either. So RDP is not going to work because Linux doesn't have an RDP server. We threw that one out. SSH doesn't work because SSH does not control the desktop. Then you have the Microsoft Remote Assistance utility. That's one that is commonly used with other folks that are using Windows, maybe at home, and you can configure kind of a on-demand remote desktop function using MSRA, the Windows Microsoft Remote Assistance. There's also VPN. 7% of you chose VPN. And although VPN is a great way to encrypt the data that is going back and forth between these systems, unfortunately, not what we were looking for. That is not the answer that's going to help for the options that are available. So that's not something we can use to make this happen. Only encrypts data from point to point, doesn't do anything with configuring the desktop on these systems. So the only option available, although we did say the most likely being used, but really it's one that the only one that we could really use in this case is VNC. So the answer is that first answer, VNC. The 29% of you that chose this one got that one absolutely right. That is what we were looking for. It is VNC because VNC does allow you to control the desktop of a Linux server. None of those other options would allow you to do that. So if you answered VNC, got that one absolutely right. That is the correct answer. RDP would not work for you because there is no RDP server for a Linux device. So let's do, I think whenever you start getting into these questions and trying to break out what the different options are, it's helpful to go through each one kind of methodically and figure out, why would this one work? Why would that one work? Is there another one that might work differently? And I think those do fit very well into the challenges that we have figuring this out. Let's do some more. We've got more questions here for you. So we're going to do this next question for you and break down the differences of these. Next one on our list is this question, and it asks, a technician is troubleshooting a Windows desktop and needs to view RAM, CPU, and network performance for each process in real time. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be System Information, Device Manager, Event Viewer, Group Policy Editor, or Resource Monitor? Number of different utilities. They are all real utilities, all real things you can use, but which one is the one that we would use? The question again, a technician is troubleshooting a Windows desktop and needs to view RAM, CPU, and network performance for each process in real time. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be System Information, Device Manager, Event Viewer, Group Policy Editor, or Resource Monitor? If you think you know the answer, Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We want to put our answer in. Follow those links on the screen to lock in all of the answers that you're looking for. Maybe it's one that you've used before. Maybe this is a function that you're familiar with already. In either case, plug it in, see what you think it is. I don't want to say there's no wrong answers. There's no bad answers. Make your best guess at what this happens to be. And even if you get it wrong, that's actually a good thing right now, because it gives you a chance to learn more about what these technologies do and how you might be able to use them. So lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA or check out the Vevox app. You'll be able to find exactly what you're looking for. Maybe that will help with some of the details of what you would like to do with this particular problem. This is one you probably will run into quite a bit. You'll sit down at a Windows desktop and you're wondering, how's this thing running? How's this thing working? Is it doing what we're expecting it to do? And so you might want to run this utility to view RAM, CPU, and network performance for each process in real time. It's going to be a lot of information on the screen. If you know all the processes running on a Windows desktop, there's a lot. So imagine seeing all of them and then seeing all of those different metrics for each individual one of them. That's a lot. So let's see if you pick the right one. You have to be very familiar with all of these different utilities to really know what the answer is going to be. And a lot of you already locked in your answer. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a technician is troubleshooting a Windows desktop, needs to view RAM, CPU, and network performance for each process in real time. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be system information, device manager, event viewer, group policy editor, or resource monitor? And as we stop the polling, 78% of you, the vast majority of you, say the answer is resource monitor. Oh, but is it the right answer? We're about to find out. We also have 8% that say event viewer, 8% say device manager, 4% say system information, and 0%, a sad zero number, says group policy editor. Nobody even chose that one, which tells me that I'm perhaps slacking off a little bit. Imagine getting a list of all the processes that are going on for your CPU, the storage, the disk, and everything else going on. You want to run Resource Monitor. Real-time updates. You see everything that is going on this one. You can see a lot that's happening inside of the Resource Monitor. A very powerful utility to be able to kind of see everything at a glance. It is a series of different categories that you could choose from. So you can see the tabs across the top for the CPU, the memory, the disk, the network. They're all there. You can break them out as individual windows if you'd like. And notice you're viewing it for each individual process that's running in the operating system. There's a lot going on there. You can run this from the command line by using resmon, or in Windows now, you just type it in at the search and find it pretty easily. That's a good way to do it. Resource Monitor, very powerful utility, can really help you with your troubleshooting. And that is a good one. Folks in the chat room are saying, but can't I use Task Manager for this? Well, you could to some degree. Task Manager, not quite as a consolidated view as Resource Monitor. However, Task Manager is not on the list. So you didn't have that option because the question asks, which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Task Manager is not one of those following, therefore not a valid answer in this particular case. But Task Manager is another nice utility to provide real-time views of what's going on. It might help you. Performance Monitor, unfortunately, is not real-time. Notice I didn't put Performance Monitor in here either because I didn't really want to get into the details of that. That's not a real-time view. It's more like a 1-second update. And very often when you're troubleshooting the operating system, you need much more granularity than a 1-second update, especially when it comes to access to your storage and access to CPU and the other pieces as well. I think that may be a good way to kind of approach this and work through the details. I think, and most of you knew this already, 78% of you got this one absolutely right. Resource Monitor was the right answer. That's what we were shooting for. And if you answered that one, you got it absolutely correct. System information just gives you kind of a static view of the configuration of your system, both for hardware and software. It'll tell you what version of Windows you're running, what version of BIOS you have. but it really doesn't give you any performance metrics. Device Manager helps you manage the device drivers that are on your system. You can enable or disable devices. You can update the drivers, but again, doesn't tell you any performance information. Event Viewer, just like the name implies, is the log viewer for Windows. And it tells you everything about what's in the logs, but it does not provide you with any performance information. And then lastly, Group Policy Editor, a powerful editor. You will most likely be very familiar with this if you get into a Windows environment. But again, that's one for setting policies, for configuring the end stations and the functionalities that they can use, but it doesn't tell you anything about the performance of those devices. The only one here, even though it's his best choice, it's really the only choice, is indeed Resource Monitor. That is the answer we were looking for, and 78% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, as you can tell already, there's a lot of stuff in these sets of exams. Just the core 2 that we've stepped through already has been extensive with security and Windows and Linux and Mac OS and troubleshooting and so much more. And of course, on the core 1 side, you have to deal with cloud computing and hardware and networking. Command lines are a little bit in core 1, a lot of command lines in core 2. One way that you could become more familiar with what's in these videos without having to go through all of the videos themselves are my course notes. These are the course notes. They just have them up on my screen here. All the text from my videos is in here. All the important graphics are in here. All of the charts that you're looking for are in the course notes. It's a consolidated view of everything in these videos. And if you're someone who just doesn't have time to go through every video, or you would like to have a summary of all these notes available without you having to write down every word that's on the screen, I've already done it for you. You can find it on our website at professormesser.com/1102notes, or simply follow the links at the top of your screen. And you can take everything in those 137 videos, over 19 hours of content, and collapse it down into a single guide. Not only is there a digital version, there's also a physical edition available. And if you purchase the physical edition, I'll of course ship that to you anywhere in the world, but you can also get the digital version for free if you buy the physical version. So a little bonus there for those of you that are getting the physical version. So you immediately have something to go through and read through when you hit the website and you're waiting for that book to be delivered. Another good way to do it, go to professormesser.com/1102notes. Let's do some more questions. I got some more coming up. This next question asks, a corporate user is authenticating to their Windows desktop with a username and password. Which of the following is most likely in use? Is that, here we go, is it TACAX Plus, MFA, Radius, Something You Have, or Kerberos? These are the 5 different options available. A corporate user is authenticating to their Windows desktop with a username and password. Which of the following is most likely in use? Is it TACAX Plus, MFA, Radius, Something You Have, or Kerberos? If you think you know the answer, use the links on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll be able to find out what you think the answer might be. A number of you getting your answers in right now. Look at the numbers going up. So go scrolling right up there. Maybe you know what this one is. Maybe you've decided that you don't know and you're just going to guess. So how much time does that really take? It's hard for me to really break apart what these two things might be. So hopefully you're familiar with what this happens to be. Hopefully that can help you figure out what the answers are. All of those are real things, by the way. I didn't make any of those up. There's TACAX Plus, MFA, Radius, Something You Have, and Kerberos are all real things. And you need to know all of them. They're all from the exam objectives. So make sure that you are familiar with those objectives, because this question could have any of these as the correct answer. Of course, in this case, there's only one. But I want you to find the right one for this list to be able to do that. And if you don't know, if you're not sure at all, you take a guess. That's your number one rule on the exam, by the way, is never leave a question blank. Always, always, always guess. Because if you guess at the answer, you will be able to at least have a chance of getting some free points. If you guess and you get the question wrong, from what we have been able to determine, it does not count against you. It doesn't take points away from you. You just won't get any points if you get a question wrong. We think you only get points when you get a question right, which means you could guess all day and there's no penalty for doing that. Your only penalty, I guess, if you don't get the points, if that's a penalty. It's hard to call that a penalty, though. It's just a neutral if you get it wrong. So hopefully that can position you the right way. Let's see how you did. Folks in the chat room are fighting over this one. Let's see how you did with this one. A question asks, a corporate user is authenticating to their Windows desktop with a username and password. Which of the following is most likely in use? Is it TACAX Plus, MFA, Radius, something you have, or Kerberos? We'll stop the poll. And your answers are, wow, we're all over the place. And they're all double-digit answers. Whew, I love the double-digit answers. And all the way across here. So none of us really know the answer to this one. So you've got 29% say Kerberos, 27% say MFA. That's practically a tie to first. So in that perspective, we've got 17% that said Radius, 15% say something you have. I think that's effectively a tie. And then you've got TACAX Plus at 10%. So you've got a few options available here and kind of thinking through what the different things might be, but which one is it really? We're authenticating, we're at a Windows login. You've seen the Windows login before, right? You got a place you can go with that, the Windows login, and you're putting in your username and you put in the password and you hit login to see where it goes. And I think that's where it really helps you to know what's going on behind the scenes. When you click that login button, what is happening? Well, for those of you not familiar with the back-end authentication protocols used by Windows, what's going on behind the scenes is Kerberos. Kerberos is the method that is a single sign-on functionality that Windows uses when you're logging in. It uses this process to be able to assign you a ticket that you can then, behind the scenes, pass to any resource on the network to provide you with access without you having to use the username and password prompt over and over and over again. If you've logged into a corporate environment before, you may have even noticed that you're typing away username and password in the morning, and then you never type it in anymore. It just never shows up again. This is a protocol that's been around for a long time. It was perfect, though, to integrate into Windows. It actually goes back to the days of LAN Manager. For those of you that understand the history of Microsoft and networking, LAN-Man, as we would call it, used Kerberos to some degree as well. Not quite as advanced as the one that's using today, but they really started integrating it into Windows in Windows 2000. It's an open standard. It's compatible with lots of different operating systems. And I think if you were someone who was trying to properly authenticate and you were trying to troubleshoot this authentication process, you really need to know what's happening behind the scenes. You not only need to know what to troubleshoot, you need to know what not to troubleshoot, if that makes any sense. So hopefully that's one that kind of helps as you were kind of breaking through all of these. So let's see these answers and how you chose. We now know Kerberos was the right answer. 29% of you chose Kerberos, so we can kind of put that one aside for now. What about these others? These are all things associated with authentication. So, but the real question here is, what type of authentication are we doing? We are in the corporate environment, we are at Windows, and all we typed in was a username and password. There was no mention about anything else in the world than just a username and password. So we know that as this, by default, you should know, well, if you're just in a corporate network logging into Windows, you should know the default is Kerberos. And that's what's going to happen, because this question asks you, which of the following is most likely in use? The most likely answer is going to be Kerberos by a long shot. It's not even close. But if you were an enterprising system administrator and you didn't want to use Kerberos, you wanted to use some other type of authentication, there are ways to do that with 802.1x. You could use things like TACAX Plus, which started as a Cisco authentication protocol and has turned into something that's a little more open. They do have open source type or open standards associated with TACAX and TACAX Plus. But this one obviously is not the default for Windows. It's not what you would even ever commonly use with Windows. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen anyone use TACACS Plus as an authentication, backend authentication method for Windows logins. So very rarely, if ever, would you ever see something like that. Same idea with Radius. Radius is another authentication protocol. It's not Cisco specific. It's almost everything else specific. Almost anything that's not Windows can authenticate with Radius. And it's very common to see on VPN authentications, wireless authentications, really any kind of authentication. It's not unusual to run Radius, but it's not an authentication type that you would see running on a corporate device and only using a username and password to log in on Windows. Nope, you would not use Radius for that. So throw that one out. The last two are kind of the same thing, aren't they? We've got MFA, multi-factor authentication, where you are using more than one type of authentication to log in. There's lots of different multi-factors that you could use. You could have something you know, which is a password. That's a single factor of authentication. You've got something you are, maybe a fingerprint or an iris scan. That's a biometric. That's a type of multi-factor authentication when you got more than one of those. You've got something you have. Something you have is even listed here as an option. That is a type of factor that can be used with multi-factor authentication. And for multi-factor, we would have to use more than one of them. For the login we did here on this corporate user on their Windows desktop, they put in a username and a password. There's only one factor here. Username is a public thing, so that's not an authentication factor. We don't use that at all. That's something that everybody sees. That's why when you type in your username, you can see it on the screen. Obviously, you don't want to give away your username to attackers that might be out there, but it's not used for authentication. The thing that's along with the username is the password, something you know, but it's only one factor of the authentication. It's not multi-factor, it's single-factor authentication in this particular example. So MFA, although you are using something you know, you're only using one factor. It's more like FA, factor authentication, single-factor authentication, which we never say. We never say single-factor. We always say multi-factor. So if you were asked if this sentence said a corporate user is authenticating to their Windows desktop with a username, password, and a random token or a fingerprint or some other type of factor, then there would be multi-factor because there would be more than one. So in this case, MFA and something you have don't apply. The only answer here that really does apply is Kerberos. 29% of you got that one absolutely right. It is the right answer. That is what we were looking for. And if you are logging into Windows, you may not even realize it, but you're logging in with Kerberos. So hopefully that gives you something else to think about during these times when you're logging into a system and wondering, what's going on back there? What's that doing? We're getting close to the top of the hour, but let's fit in. Oh, before we fit in another question, I want to mention to you that I would love to send you an email that gives you a 1 hour of a webinar category CEU verification. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then this doesn't apply to you. But if you are working on renewing your A+ or any other cert, you might need these continuing education unit credits. The way that you would earn this, you must follow these instructions to earn it. You have to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click on the Contact Us link. That Contact Us link will bring up a form. Put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put September 2023. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, Kerberos. Kerberos is the super secret code word of the month. And then if you'd like to put anything else in that body of that message, you're more than welcome to. I read through every single one of these, and I love doing it. It's nice to hear your stories about what you're working on, what you've been able to complete, maybe the reason that you're getting these CEUs. I do read through all of them. Unfortunately, not able to respond back specifically to all of them, but I will send you back an email that certifies that you were here for 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. So that's the way you do it. Top and bottom of the website, click Contact Us, put in your name, your email. Subject line should be September 2023. And in the body of the message, put the word Kerberos, and I'll send you in about a week or less, maybe more. You'll get an email from me that certifies, I even digitally sign it. So you can confirm that it really came from me and that nothing was changed after I sent that email to you. So you've got a few options there. Let's do another question. I know we're sort of at the top. We're going to go over time because why wouldn't we? Next question on our list asks, when visiting a website, a browser shows your connection is not private. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this message? Would it be VPN not enabled, invalid cert, FDE not active, incorrect credentials, or device not patched? When visiting a website, a browser shows your connection is not private. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this message? Is it VPN not enabled, invalid cert, FDE not active, incorrect credentials, or device not patched? If you think you know the answer, follow the links on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA or follow the Vevox link on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We'll figure out what the right answer might be. You do have to be able to troubleshoot these browser errors. It's a whole big section, not a big section, but a section of the CompTIA website, of the CompTIA exam objectives anyway. Maybe you'll be able to decipher these a little better once we're through this particular question. We'll break them all down for you. The numbers not going up quite as fast as the other one, although that last one, the numbers went up really quick, but we ended up having like a three-way tie for first place. So now I never know. I never know what to expect. You always have me on my toes. That's why I love these live streams. We just never know what it's going to be. And pulling those up. If you want to answer, visit professormesser.com/QA to answer the question, or use the links on your screen to join with that ID right there, and you can answer the question. It'll be right there on your screen. You can also ask questions now for the after show that we're going to do in just a few minutes. So there's a few things you can do from that Vevox app. Makes it very, very easy. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, when visiting a website, a browser shows your connection is not private. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this message? Is it VPN not enabled, invalid cert, FDE not active, incorrect credentials, or device not patched? It's got to be one of these, right? Let's stop the poll. Stop the poll. And now we can see that 68% of you talk about bouncing back, say it's invalid cert. And I think you're right. I think that's the right answer. 20% said VPN not enabled. We've got 5% that said full disk encryption not active. 3% say incorrect credentials, and 1% say device not patched. Let's talk about browser security alerts. This is an interesting place to work in the browser. And there are a lot of different alert messages you might get. And I'm presenting one of them on your screen right now. This is a screen from my browser, and it even says your connection is not private. It tells you why it thinks the connection is not private. And you can see that it goes through a lot of details of what this might be. Where I got these messages, if you ever want to go through and test messages, error messages in your browser to see when a particular error occurs, what is this error? The place to go is the one that I used for this, badssl.com. It is a website specifically built to have your browser show these errors. They put together a ton of different sites and pages, and when you click them, it shows you an error and it tells you why that error showed up. Very nice little website to go to for something like this. For troubleshooting it, it's something that's not right with the certificate. There's something bad. Maybe it's expired. Maybe the name on the certificate doesn't match the name of the website you're going to. There's a whole page full of things at Bad SSL that could go wrong. And it's useful to be more familiar with these. Now, this is a very common one. Your connection is not private. It's a very generic message because what it's really saying is something in this certificate doesn't match what it's showing me. And so it's very, very generalized. That's why it's useful to click that link where the lock is and drill down into that little HTTPS connection to figure out, why is it complaining about this? Is it the time? Did it expire? Is there something else going on I should know about? Lots of in the browser that you should work through. And indeed, it's something that's not valid with the cert on that web server. So, of course, if there is really legitimately something that's not right with the cert, you should contact the website administrator and say, why is your certificate giving me this error? And then you can troubleshoot why that may be the case. 20% of you said VPN not enabled. And although a VPN allows you to encrypt data between your device and either a remote site or a remote VPN concentrator, and a web server is not going to provide you with a message telling you if you are using or not using a VPN, because the web server doesn't know how you're connecting, or it really doesn't care either. And it doesn't display anything related to VPN, non-VPN, or anything else. So you will not get a message on a browser that shows your connection is not private if you're simply not using a VPN. That was the case. Every person probably now who's not using a VPN would see tons of messages saying your connection's not private, but we're not seeing that, are we? So it can't be that one. Full disk encryption is when you are encrypting and protecting all of the data that is stored on a storage drive or a volume. Full disk encryption has nothing to do with a message that would show in your browser saying your connection is not private. So that's not going to help you either. Incorrect credentials, using the wrong username and password. We didn't even mention any credentials here. All we said is we visited a website and we said your connection is not private. Even if we had a pop-up for credentials and we put in the wrong username or password, you would not get a message that says your connection is not private. It will tell you your credentials are not correct. So that's not the problem we ran into. And lastly, device not patched. This is the only one that could potentially, technically, could be an answer that you would select. Because there is potential here that a website is using a certificate authority that has not been updated in your browser. Maybe it's a brand new CA, but your browser doesn't know about the new CA yet. So anytime you visit that website, it will say, that connection's not private. I don't even recognize that CA. And what it's really waiting for you to do is update your computer with a list of all the newer CAs. All these updates that you get every month, they almost always have updates like that, including updates for your certificate authority list. So that is the only one that could potentially be an answer that you could have chosen. You 1.46% that thought you were last. Actually, you're probably second place in this list. The problem is that is such a rare thing to occur. It's such an unusual thing that you would run into that it would not be the most likely reason for this problem, given the other options available, because invalid cert is a much more likely reason for this to occur. Not even much more likely, infinitely more likely. Maybe not infinitely. Infinitely is a lot, but a great deal more likely. Exponentially more likely in that particular case is an invalid cert. And there is a page full of things that could potentially cause this type of problem. And maybe what we'll do is in the after show, we will do some bad SSL. You'll see the differences in using these and really what this would turn into if you were working through the details. So there you go. That is the answer. That's what we were looking for, was to see that it's something in that cert is not quite right. It's a bad cert, and that's what we were focusing on and having a real problem trying to figure out those details. We're way past the top of the hour, but why don't we fit one more question in? I happen to have a question. This one is a question that comes from my practice exams book. If you haven't seen my practice exams book, it is a big book. It's a big list of questions. It's actually 3 separate practice exams, 5 performance-based questions in each exam. So you get 15 performance-based questions in here. You get 85 multiple choice-based questions across all of these. So total of 390 question exams in here. You don't even commonly get 90 questions on an exam, but you do in my book, just so we cover the bases of everything that's in here. One of the challenges I've seen when looking at practice exams on the internet is they constantly ask you about things that aren't on the exam. Drives me crazy. Why are you asking me a topic that pulled off the exam 6 years ago? But some of these exams, they just never update, and they just expect you to know it somehow. I'm not even sure why they would do that. But I have for you a question from my practice exams book. Let's do this one. Again, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. This is from my book, question A16. It asks, each time a user starts a specific corporate application, a page of disclaimers and usage requirements is shown before the login prompt. Which of the following would best describe this page? Is it splash screen, acceptable use policy, standard operating procedures, or topology diagram. So now we have the choice of what to choose from. Now, this is in a PDF form, so if you have a stylus, you could write on your PDF itself. Many PDF readers have things that you can highlight or change. If you think you know the answer, you can select different things on the screen. So you do have things that you can play around with and annotate as you go through this, because it's a PDF and it's an open PDF, one that you can make changes to. You can write in, you can put anything else you want in here. It's not restricted in any way. So, but here in this case, I'm on page, what page is this? This is page 8. It's on page 8. The answer is on page 33. If I just want to know, is it A, B, C, or D? And I want to get a detailed set of answers, it's on page 52. Well, instead of scrolling down to page 52, I've already annotated. I'm thinking maybe it's D. So I just made a link right here on the screen of D. So let's click the details, which takes me all the way to page 52. It just went really quick for that. And it took me back to the question. There's the question, is it splash screen, acceptable use policy, standard operating procedures, or topology diagram? And you notice that I put on here the answer is a splash screen. That is the correct answer in this case. And I explained to you why that's the right answer, which is very common to see on many practice exams. My problem, though, is I never get the answer right. And they never tell me why the wrong answer is wrong. So in my books, every wrong answer is fully explained as to why it's wrong. Why would it not be acceptable use policy? Why would it not be standard operating procedures? Why would it not be a topology diagram? And I explain why it would not be. Because on your exam, you may get a question about AUPs or standard operating procedures or topology diagrams. And I want you to be as familiar with these topics as possible. All of the answers that are in here, probably 99.9999% of the answers that are in here, are answers that are pulled directly from the latest exam objectives. Sometimes I have to make one up to fill in the form. That doesn't happen very often, if ever. Probably have to look through and see. All of these are designed to fit the actual exam objectives for the 220-1102. You're not going to get questions from the 1002, the 902, the 802, the 702 that you might get with others. So I think that's really what we should focus on, is really understanding what the different practice exams might be and where you would fit those into this mix. Hopefully, this is something that you're familiar with. You've kind of seen these before. You've gotten a familiarity with these technologies and the different things that are there. Also, if you don't understand the question, I include a link to the video itself. So you can go watch the video that I used to make the question to begin with. Another great place to bring back and understand, no, this really is very specific to the 220-1102. So that's the difference, is making sure that you have all of this. There's even a QR code. If you have this in a digital form, you just use your phone to get a picture of it. Or if you have the digital version, or the physical version, same thing. Those QR codes are in the book as well. Let's find one that's got a QR code. That would be good if I was demonstrating. There we go. Kind of see those QR codes at the bottom. Another great way to do it. And again, if you get the physical book, you get the digital version for free. Once I'm done with this, it's a PDF, of course. I'd use the back button in my PDF. You may not even realize you have a back button in your PDF. You probably do. Use the back button, and it takes you back to where you started, and you go to the next question on your list. That is my practice exams. They're available on my website. You can use the pull-down menu at the top of the screen, or simply go to professormesser.com/core2PE. CORE number 2 PE. That's the Core 2 practice exams. It's available on the Professor Messer website. Thank you for your indulgence. Also let you know that if you'd like something free that can help you study, you should go get the objectives if you've not gotten them already. The exam objectives are extensive. They will tell you everything you need to know for this exam. CompTIA rolls up all of the objectives into one big document that fully tells you everything. It's all documented on everything you need to know to pass this exam. They stick to this list like glue. Like they never seem to deviate from this list. And I tell people all the time, if you know every bullet that is in these exam objectives, you're going to pass your exam. That's how close they stay to these objectives. That's how important it is that you stay close to these objectives. Those are the exam objectives. You can find them on the CompTIA website to download for free. You can use the link on my site to get over there at professormesser.com/objectives, or just type into your favorite search engine, CompTIA exam Objectives. It'll take you right to them. And you can download them. Again, they're free, and they're one of the best checklists you can have for knowing if you're ready to take your exam or not. We do one of these study groups every month. Our next study group is in October for A+. We still have Network Plus and Security Plus study groups for this month. So we still got a lot more going on. Come back next week for the Network Plus study group, and a week after that for the Security Plus study group. But our next A+ study groups are in October, on October the 10th, October the 12th. Can you believe October? Am I saying October already? That's crazy that next month is October. So that's a great place to go if you're trying to join another study group. And of course, all of our replays of the study group are available on the Professor Messer website. Certainly a good one to have there. Well, we are done with me asking you questions, but we are far from finished today. Stick around for the after show where you ask me questions. We'll put them up on the screen. We'll step through each one of them. We'll have the chat room, talk about them with me. It's a great place to go to maybe get additional questions answered about technology, certifications, or really anything else that you would like to ask. I'm more than happy to take your questions. Don't forget about our course notes and practice exams on my website. You can go to professormesser.com/1102success. We have discounted vouchers if you live in the U.S. or Canada at professormesser.com/vouchers. And we'd love for you to join us over on Discord, on our YouTube channel. If you subscribed, that would be amazing. Something free you can do to make my day. And if you like this video and the things we're doing here, we'd love it if you give it a thumbs up. Press that button, and it really does help us quite a bit. Let the folks at YouTube know that you are interested in this kind of content. They really do look at those numbers. I have meetings directly with my YouTube representatives where we talk about these numbers and talk about the things that are interesting to you. And they encourage me and point out, well, people seem to like this, and they seem to like this, and they seem to like this. Why don't you do more of that? That's really how a lot of these live streams have come up. So it all helps. And thank you so much for your support as well. We got a lot to go through. Stick around for the after show. Thanks for joining us in this first hour. And we will see you next time on the A+ study group. Okay, let me take a sip. Okay, now the unscripted, completely unplanned part of the study group is the after show. That is what we're doing right now. And in the after show, I tend to ask questions about or answer questions that you submit to me. That is my Q&A that I have here. A number of you already posted questions to this. You can see there's a message on your screen that says, well, not there. You're not going to see it there on your screen. You'll see it here on the screen. There we go. That you can submit questions for the second hour at any time. I do moderate these as we go, or I give a lot of ums and ahs as I scroll through the list. You're so nice to bear with me. And we put them up on the screen so that we can all kind of look at what the different options are and what we would like to answer in our list of things. Before we get to that list of questions, because there's a number of things that are always coming into this list and working through it. And I think a number of people were asking about different options and trying to break these down. But we'll talk about more of this in just a moment. But I mentioned earlier that there was this website, Bad SSL. This is a website where you can click to see how your browser reacts to different problems. And it's just at badssl.com. That's where you would go to answer these questions. So if you wanted to see what error shows up in, right now I'm running Chrome. So of course, these errors look different depending on what browser you're in. So if you want to know what a untrusted root error looks like, you can click that and it will tell you what the untrusted error looks like in your browser. And this one is error cert authority invalid. That's the message that comes up in Chrome. And it even gives you the certificate that was the bad certificate. And you kind of see the details, the beginning and the end. There's the whole chain that's right there. We could go back and do another one. Let's do another one. This one has an extended validation, but it doesn't have the cert date invalid. I don't think EV's even working in the latest browsers. I don't know. It depends on the browser you're using, and different browsers react in different ways to these errors, which gives you even more insight into how your browser might work. But something like an expired cert gives you this and even tells you error cert date invalid. And it explains why. Well, you can see that it expires on April the 12th of 2015. Well, that kind of explains why I got any invalid date on my browser. It's right there. You can see it in the browser. It's just a nice little utility to get more familiar with the errors and troubleshooting from a browser perspective. Different browsers, of course, act differently, but it's a good way to kind of step through and understand where the best ways to do this are. If you'd like to submit a question, join us, Vevox.app. There's the ID that's on your screen. It's the same Vevox you were in before. There's just another tab that's on the screen where you can post a question right in there. And I'll be glad to take those questions as we go. Let's step through some of the questions we've already received. Let's see other questions that I have here. There's a lot that have come. Some people just putting in notes saying, hey, I passed. This is Nick. He says, I took and passed my 1101 last night. Thank you for what you do. Well, I didn't pass it. You passed it. Congratulations. Glad you got through the 1101. Hopefully you got some a quick start here on the 1102 to get through the process and be able to learn what you need to know to pass that second exam. Congratulations on that first one. That's always a good one to get through. Let's see what else we have in the list. We were talking the last study group, which is 2 days ago. We were talking about a type of exploit, an attack that it was an attack that exploited operating systems without putting a file in the file system. And this is, you commonly see these viruses and malware commonly put files in the file system and then you run it. Maybe they have you click a link and it downloads to your machine and then you click it. And that type of malware that does not save a file in your operating system is called, wait for it, fileless, a fileless malware. So the question, this is from Chris saying, the demonstration or the explanation that we provided, or an example of fileless malware, I show an example of how you're able to exploit and use PowerShell to do some of the heavy lifting under the surface. But that doesn't mean it's limited to Windows. There are some types of fileless malware that can take advantage of other methods. For example, if you're running Linux or Mac OS, it could run a shell script. It could take advantage of a vulnerability in Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Flash. You know, there are plenty of applications with vulnerabilities, and all you need is for someone to visit the right site to download that and run a script on that local machine. And that can certainly happen on any operating system. By default, Windows shouldn't do it. Mac shouldn't do it. Linux should not do this, but it's taking advantage of a vulnerability. That's why we often say how important it is to always keep your system up to date, to always have the latest patches installed on your system, not only for the operating system, but the applications that you're using as well. That way, if there is a known vulnerability, we can close it. And even if you visited a site that tries to infect you with a fileless malware, it won't be able to do it because it can't take advantage of that vulnerability. It cannot exploit that vulnerability. So that in that particular example, yeah, you could get fileless malware practically anywhere. The important part is just protecting yourself against it. And of course, you've got a backup, right? Always have backups, offline backups. Always have an offline backup. I need to modify my mantra so that I'm telling you, you should always have an offline backup. Why offline? Well, because if it's an online backup or a backup that you can access across the network and you become infected with ransomware or any other type of malware, it could go across the network to your online backup and encrypt that as well. So you could have spent all this time doing a backup and then you leave it connected and the malware is going to encrypt your backup, and then that doesn't help you at all. So I would tell you, yes, you should absolutely have a backup, but it should be an offline backup, one that is not directly accessible from your operating system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Other questions. Let's keep going with others that might be on this list. So let's see. Well, this is a relatively interesting question. We're going to talk about this one. So this is from Felicia, who says, why is network performance related to the resource monitor in Windows? The question is a good one, which says, how is network a resource? Oh, all the network administrators in the room are the hair on the back of their neck is starting to go up a little bit. What do you mean? Why is really the question is, how is anything else besides network a resource? That's what they're saying. Network is probably the one resource that's common across any operating system and device that you're going to run into. What devices do you have these days that don't connect to the network? So it is going to use some type of function in that operating system to provide that networking. And of course, traffic being sent back and forth over resource monitor, here it is, are going to use things like the network. You can't really see that. There's the network graph on the screen. Can't really see the network details down here, but it's looking at how many bytes have been sent, how many bytes have been received, how many bytes total. You've got other options that are in that mix. And then, of course, you've got the CPU and the disk. All of these work together inside of your operating system as an overall performance metric. So you really do have to understand, what is the CPU doing right now? What is the storage system doing right now? What is your memory doing right now? And certainly, how is your network performance right now? Because any one of those could cause a resource contention. If the network is too slow, everything turns slow. If the CPU is too slow, everything is slow. So you really have to break all of these apart into their smaller pieces. And then once you have it in the smaller pieces, you may even want to look at this on a per process basis to see, here is how much CPU, in this case, not a lot from any of these resources. And you can sort it so that you can see CPU seems to be spiking. Is it just one process, or is it multiple processes causing all of this contention? Same problem with the network. Is it the network is slow? Is it one particular application that is using all the network performance, all the bandwidth and availability? Very possible. So I think it's important that resource monitor measure resources across all of those, including the network. Becomes pretty important. Don't forget about the network. It can sometimes be the big difference between managing a system that's running properly and managing one that is not running well at all. Great question. Let's do another one. Let's keep going through this list. We've got some lot of questions are coming in, so I apologize for sort of flipping through them and trying to find the right one that happens to be there. This is a good one. We can kind of drill down into this, and I think we should kind of think about how these things work. Here is the question. Not there. It's here. There it is. Is it possible to be infected with malware just by opening an email? Can you just open an email and get malware? Is that possible? Is that something that could possibly happen to us? Generally speaking, broadly speaking, you have to run a program or start a process, in the case of fileless malware, for you to become infected with this malware. You can't just open an application, start Microsoft Word to a blank screen, start your email client and have it download mail, click on a graphic and have it put a picture on the screen. By themselves, you would not generally run into a situation where malware would infect your machine by simply opening an email. However, and I'm already hearing the noises coming from the internet, there are absolutely documented cases where a vulnerability in a graphics handler, when a vulnerability in a, when you click on an email, sometimes you don't look at the email, but it presents a preview of what that email has. You've probably seen this little box on the screen. It kind of shows you a preview. If you click on it, you'll get to see the whole email, but it shows you a little bit of it right now. Well, it's running a program to process what's in that email and show you that preview. Well, what if there's an error or a vulnerability associated with that process of creating and rendering that preview? And an attacker is able to use that vulnerability with a specially formed set of code or picture, an image. And when that preview is shown, the image effectively executes because of the way the rendering works. It really is the code. The malware is the picture. And the thing that is actually executing is the rendering engine that shows you the preview. And that causes malware to get onto your machine. It is really a very, very specific situation when that occurs. But the demonstration or the explanation that I just gave was an actual vulnerability in Outlook. So it happens. It's not impossible for it to happen, but the email you receive and how it is rendered, those things working together could potentially cause a system to be infected. Now, if that was really a problem, that was really an issue, then we would never use email. We would never have the rendering engine set up. We would never open a graphic because we'd be too scared that malware is in the graphic. We would never look at images on our screens ever again. But you notice we aren't in that situation. We aren't worried about that. And that's because those are, first, extremely rare vulnerabilities, but they are so significant in their scope. Imagine everyone who runs that email, like everyone running Outlook, is suddenly now going to infect themselves by reading a particular email message. You can bet those get fixed very, very, very quickly. So we don't often see those. They are exceedingly rare, but it's possible. It's one of those situations that you hardly ever, these come around every few years. Do we ever hear anything like this? But the attackers, they're crafty. They are good at finding every possible entryway into your system. And if they can manipulate the preview rendering process to run arbitrary code that is embedded within a graphic, first, well done. Nicely played, attacker. You did a great job with that. And we hate you, by the way. That's as much as you get. But we're going to patch this and you'll never be able to take advantage of that again. It's very impressive. But yes, you would absolutely do that. It was, I've seen this with Microsoft Outlook, and one previously to that was a graphics application. I don't even remember which one it was, but I think it was a Windows-based graphic application that did not properly securely interpret the graphic that was coming in. And indeed, in my next Security Plus course that will be published in November, I do give you an example of how an SVG graphic could embed within it JavaScript that could potentially take advantage of a cross-site scripting vulnerability. So this is not too far beyond the realm of possibility. I show that on the screen. So that's a pretty good example of how you could get infected with malware just by opening an email, but we don't, because we've patched those vulnerabilities, and currently there are no known vulnerabilities that would allow someone to infect your machine by malware just by you opening an email. Now, if you open the email and then you click the link in the email, that's different. If you open the email and you save a file that was attached to the email onto your system and run it, that's different. But just by opening the email, no, you're not gonna infect yourself. You're good. Don't worry about it. You're okay to go through that list. There's more questions here. You can look over my shoulder as I scroll through some of the questions that are on this list. We have a lot to go through on here. Wait, there's too many of me on the screen. We cannot have that. There we go. That's much better. Other questions we have. Let's keep going. In this list. So, this is probably a pretty good one to go through. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out these details. This is from Braden, who asks, that's not what Braden asks. Braden asks this one right here, which says, does the Core 2 exam have more practical work when compared to Core 1? For example, I'm seeing lots of Active Directory, command line interface tools in the Core 2. Core 1 had a lot of theory and items like cable speeds. So that's the first question, which is, does the Core 2 exam have more practical questions than Core 1? Yes, absolutely. What you are seeing in the exam objectives with Core 2 is absolutely the case, that there is, first, practically all of the command line utilities you need to know are in the Core 2. Core 2 expects you to know a lot more about troubleshooting Windows. So there's more practical click on this, move this, use that utility kind of thing. You have to know a lot more about the utilities included with Windows and how to use them, like Resource Monitor, like Event Viewer, like Performance Monitor, like Task Manager, like Device Manager. You have to know all of those. And so there is more of a practical side of that. Well, the Core 1 kind of sets you up, and generally we used to call these two exams the hardware exam and the operating system exam, because Core 1 had a lot of hardware and Core 2 has a lot of operating system. In reality, they have been a little more diluted than that these days. The Core 1 is hardware, but it also includes networking. It also includes troubleshooting, all of that. So, and cloud. So there's a little bit of that there. Was cloud on Core 1? Cloud on Core 2. In Core 2, it's more operating system. So it's Windows, Microsoft's Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It's also security is in Core 2. That's a pretty big one, is the security one. So there is, I would say, more hands-on on Core 2 than there is on Core 1. The difficulty level, I think, is similar between both. Obviously, the topics are dramatically different, but the way the questions are worded and the way that you, the difficulty level that those questions bring to the table is very similar between Core 1 and Core 2. As long as you know the exam objectives, you're going to be fine. As a follow-up, there's also a postscript on this. What would your best recommendation be for practicing Active Directory? Well, first, you don't necessarily need to practice Active Directory for the Core 2. I think if you watched my video on Active Directory, you'd have all the information you needed to answer the questions that were on the exam. But I think it's probably a pretty good idea, if you want to do a lab for yourself, is to set up a device, a Windows server, load it up into a virtual machine with Active Directory. Windows Server comes with Active Directory on it. So you would download an evaluation of Windows Server. It's available on the Microsoft website. It's a 90-day evaluation. They don't ask a lot of information from you. They don't bother you. They don't call you every day. They let you download the code. You can run it without a license for 90 days. Perfectly legal. Microsoft says it's fine. It's perfectly legitimate in the terms of service and the in-user license agreement. The thing is, though, you probably want to connect a machine to it. So you would need a little bit of memory in your computer to do this, but it would be great to run Active Directory on one device on your Windows server, and then maybe load up Windows 10 or Windows 11 in a different VM. There are evaluations, or at least images of those, available on the Microsoft site as well, and you can run them without a license. So even though you get that error on the screen that says this is an unlicensed version of Windows, it's okay. For the purposes of the lab and what we're doing, it works fine. And you can load Microsoft Server, any server version, the latest one is fine, and load it up with Active Directory, then install Windows, and then connect that Windows machine to the Active Directory device. Effectively, you're running your own corporate network on that piece of it. Is the server 180 days? So they've even extended it out even further. So you can go half a year running that. So in that particular case, you've got now a fully functional corporate Active Directory infrastructure. You can even build out extra users. I mean, that's pretty much what I did in my video. If you go back and look at my video, it's just 2 VMs that I'm running. Interestingly, on Mac OS, I'm running a VM of Windows Server. I'm running a VM of Microsoft Windows. I think I used Windows 11, but it doesn't matter. 10 or 11 is fine. And I connected them together, and I started setting policies for that workstation. I started configuring what is the minimum password, what applications are available for that user to run. And I push those over to the Windows 11 device, and then we try to see if it takes. Does it now restrict me? Does it now mean that I have to change my password? Do I now have a limitation on what I can do in the operating system? You can do all of those. So I think that's one that can really, really help you if you're wanting to get that hands-on. Now, I don't have a video that describes the process of installing Microsoft Server with Active Directory with a separate machine. There's plenty of videos on the YouTube that can walk you through that. Too many, it seems. There's a lot. So find one that works for you. And one of the things that I think is important, and I mentioned this kind of as an aside, is when you go through this process of building this out, you're effectively creating a corporate infrastructure from scratch. you will undoubtedly run into a technical snag, an issue, and you'll need to research it and figure it out. But I will tell you that hitting the errors is probably the most important part of the process, because you really don't learn anything unless it's broken. And then you start diving into it. Why is it broken? What is the error message that I'm getting? What does that error message mean? What do other people say I should do when that error message appears? And what thing fixed the error? So you should document this, and you should use that information when you go to your interview, because they're going to ask you, can you tell me a time when you had to troubleshoot a problem and what was the process you went through? There's your 15-minute story on running into a problem. In fact, it's a great thing to run into a problem. Well, I was installing Windows Server. Already they're like, what? You install Windows Server? Tell me more. Oh, I was installing it to run Active Directory. Oh, you're running Active Directory. Tell me more. Well, we ran into this problem, and here's the situation. This was the error I got, and here's how I troubleshot the error. Here's where I gathered more information from. I made these changes to my Windows 11. Finally, it solved the problem. Boom. And there. Now you've got 15 minutes of a story where you can talk about first things that they're running in their infrastructure: Windows Server, Windows 11, Active Directory. So they already know you're familiar with those technologies. And then you could say, here's the problem I ran into. And they're probably like, yep, that's a common one. We run into that all the time. And here's how I fix it. Oh, very good. You did a good job fixing it. And then you can even say, and then here's what I did with Active Directory once I got it running. So you can kind of control the conversation. If you're ever in an interview, one of the best things you can do is to control the conversation. I don't think they talk about this very much. I've looked through a number of videos on going to an interview, and it's usually more about how do you answer this question. But if you walk into the room and they ask you a question like that, and you just go for 15 minutes talking about all of the things you did to make this happen, it becomes a conversation. And they'll prompt you as you go, oh, well, did you do this? What about that? Did you ever see this thing? And you have a nice conversation about this, because now they know the things you know. You've effectively become the expert in the room for that particular process. And I would tell you, not a lot of people do this. Not a lot of people install Windows Server from scratch into a VM. Not a lot of people run a separate operating system and connect them to the Active Directory. And I think there's a lot of value to that. You could be the expert in the room on that particular issue, probably better than other people that are showing up for the same job. So if you're looking to differentiate yourself, that is a very, very good way to differentiate yourself. I will say, though, having installed Active Directory, I don't know, a bazillion times at this point, there is one error that is probably the most common error for people starting up Active Directory, getting it running for the very first time. An exceptionally common error, and it's the one that everybody seems to run into. Hopefully, you'll run into it. It's kind of an odd thing to wish on someone, but hopefully you will run into that, because then you can create a story from it. I highly recommend you do. That's my recommendation. Go download Windows Server, go to Active Directory and start it up. There are these tiny little errors, things you might run into, and those are very valuable errors to have. So always take advantage of the problems. Problem is there as an opportunity. What we do in our career in IT is we constantly solve problems. We are puzzle solvers. That's what we do. And I highly recommend you embrace those problems. Learn as much as you can about what it's doing. A lot of times people go, just reboot it, see what's going on. And sometimes you're tight on time, and rebooting it fixes it, and you're off to the next thing. But you never really knew what that problem was. Why did that problem ever show up? How can we prevent that problem from showing up again? Unless you spend the time doing the research, you'll never know. So if you have the ability to really troubleshoot a problem and try to learn as much as you can about it, that's the way to do it. Highly recommend you go down that road. Let's do another question. If you'd like to submit a question, they are on the Vevox. If I can get my Vevox on the screen here. Well, you can submit questions directly from Vevox. The Vevox ID is right there on the screen, 125-386-042. You can also, there should be just a tab there where you can put in the Vevox details there, and you could submit a question at any time. More questions. Let's keep going. So there's a couple of things in this list I'll focus on. Let's take this one from Jacob. So Jacob asks, I'm struggling with scripting questions. Well, welcome to your career. This is a common story. What study materials do you recommend? So we'll focus solely on the requirements for scripting as they are associated with the 220.11.02 exam. So the question on this one and scripting questions, they really focus just on the scripting languages that are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. So let's look at these. The scripting, this is the objectives themselves. There's section 4.8, identify the basics of scripting. And the script file types are BAT, PS1, VBS, SH, JS, and PY. We already did 4 of these today. You already know PS1 is PowerShell. You already know VBS is the Visual Basic for scripts. You already know that SH is a shell script. You already know that JS is JavaScript. And you already know that PY is Python. The only one we really didn't do, I guess, was BAT. And I did talk about BAT. So we talked about all the script types today. Those are the ones you need to really, for the exam, understand the basics of those scripting types. Know the difference between a BAT and a shell. Understand when you would use them. Understand which would be the best in a particular scenario. Same thing with PS1. Same thing with VBS. Same thing with JS. Same thing with PY. Step through all of them to understand this. Now, for the exam, you don't need to know how to script. You don't need to know how to go through the process of building and running your own scripts. Not necessary for the Core 2. Is it necessary in life? Yes. But we aren't looking to certify in life, at least not right now. We're looking to certify in the A+. And from the A+'s perspective, I really need to know what these 4 or 5 or 6 different scripting languages are and when to use them. That's the extent of what you would need to know. And so the videos on my site, any books that you might be running, and of course you could look through those individual scripting types on the internet and read through a number of different websites that talk about those scripts to really see what the differences might be. And maybe there's a particular scripting language you really like. If you like PowerShell, I think if you've never used PowerShell and you're looking to go to work for someone that's got a lot of Windows devices, go get a book on PowerShell. Go read it. Go become familiar with it, at least the basics of it, so that if you're in an interview and they talk about doing something in PowerShell, you could talk about what you've done in PowerShell on your machine and maybe combine that with the Active Directory Windows server that you installed. See, it all builds on each other. So I think that's a great approach to it, but don't worry so much with the scripting. You're not going to be in a situation where they're going to ask you to script something. In fact, in IT, and I've mentioned this many times, in IT, we do not program. We don't write apps in IT. We don't build web-based apps. We don't build mobile apps. We don't compile executables. We don't do that. That's for these computer science folks to deal with. IT focuses on keeping these systems up and running, maintaining the data, making sure we have connectivity, making sure that all those systems are secure. So effectively taking the apps that are built by the computer science folks and making sure that they work in a production environment, they stay up and running, and that they're always available and secure. That is our goal in IT. So I tell people all the time, don't worry about the programming part. They say, what language should I use? Should I learn C++? Should I learn all of these other? No, you really don't need to learn C++. You really don't need to learn anything in the mobile side to build your own mobile app. You're not going to do that. Now, if you wanted to do that as something separate, maybe in your spare time, you enjoy doing that piece of it, yes. There are times, though, where you will need to automate. You will need to script. You will need to, I don't really like to call it coding. I mean, technically speaking, you are coding when you write a script. I really think of it as scripting, because writing a script does not require anywhere close to the same level of knowledge as someone who's building out an app. It simply is not even in the same ballpark. So I tell people all the time, yes, it's good to know how to compile things because You may be compiling something in Linux, but you're not the one that wrote the app that you're compiling. You're just running really two simple commands to set it up and run it. And in fact, it's all scripted behind the scenes anyway. We're not really doing the heavy lifting on that one. Somebody else wrote the code. Maybe you're creating an executable from the code, but you didn't write the code to begin with. Or you're just installing the code. You're not the one writing the app. But being able to automate things is very, very, very powerful. And I think those two, if you do nothing with scripting now and you're wondering, where do I start with scripting? If you're in a Windows-based environment, PowerShell. If you're in an environment with more than Windows or an emphasis in a different operating system like Linux or Mac OS, go learn everything you can learn about Python. Those are the two places to start. Now, there is some advantage to understanding how to run a batch file, understanding how to run a shell script. I think you can automate tons of things in Mac OS, Linux, and Windows by just knowing those technologies. But once you know PowerShell and once you know Python, it's very, very easy to start and writing some very simple shell scripts. I use shell scripts extensively on ProfessorMesser.com. I have things that happen all the time throughout the day that I need to automate. I need to do backups. I need to transfer files. I need to put information here. I need to all kinds of things that happen. And having that knowledge of a shell script, I wouldn't be able to have this site if I didn't have that knowledge. Somebody's got to maintain it. So that's what I do. I write scripts and I put them on my server and I maintain it. I'm my system administrator for the website. So that's one very good use of shell scripts. I also do, there's a little bit of Python there. There's a little bit of PHP. There's a little bit of other scripts that are running on those. But knowing one or two of those positions you well for understanding the others so much better. And I think if you were going to focus today on one of those, pick one of them. Pick PowerShell or pick Python. That's it. Learn everything you can about those and then put it on your resume because it will make a difference. It won't just make a difference on your ability to understand it or get a job, but it will make a difference when you're in the job. Because now they'll come to you and say, well, we need to change this setting on everybody's computer. Hey, we just got notified that a new vulnerability attacks. Well, here's a perfect example of this. I'll give you a real life example. A worm started taking over and ransomware was being put on machines all over the internet. This is code red. And it used a vulnerability in Eternal Blue. And that vulnerability attacked systems, really an exploit rather, that attacked a vulnerability in systems associated with server message block version 1. It's a method of transferring files and controlling files between Windows systems that goes back to kind of the early versions of Windows. These days we use SMB higher versions, version 2 and higher, to do other things on our systems. But by default, the version 1 was turned on because there are times on your systems when you might use that to communicate to a legacy device. And so instead of it not working, Windows just left it turned on. Well, it turns out there was a significant security vulnerability in SMB version 1. And this worm took advantage of that vulnerability. It was a worm. It did not need you to click on anything. Your machine's just sitting on the network. And all of a sudden, whoop, it's all encrypted and ransomware screen is up. You didn't even touch anything. You didn't even click anything. Just took advantage of the vulnerability. So one of the things we did right off was every Windows administrator in the world was tasked that very day with disabling SMB v1 on every single machine in their environment. Well, how would you even do that? Do you go to machine, move? Let me click on stuff. I got to change the registry. Really, the question we had earlier today was an exact example of what they ended up doing, which was instead of visiting everybody's machine individually, they simply configured a login script or to run a script that people could click on that would go to the registry, automatically modify the registry, and turn off SMB v1. All done with scripting. And so they were able to very easily deploy this update. Really wasn't, it didn't close the vulnerability. It didn't modify Windows, but it mitigated the problem by preventing that section of Windows from being used. So even though it was the same code in Windows, we had not patched Windows yet, we did effectively mitigate the worm because it wasn't able to get in at that point once we turned off SMB v1. So that's a really good example of if you were familiar with running PowerShell, you could have very quickly put together a script. Now, as it turns out, because everyone in the world was dealing with this, people were putting out tools and options and information, and everyone was helping everyone else with understanding the best way to deploy this fix. And it was one of those very busy times we often have in our industry. But if you had known PowerShell, you wouldn't even need any input. Like, oh, yeah, I can do that. Write a little script. 5 minutes later, there's my script. We can deploy this, and then we close the hole. And now nobody else can take advantage of that hole. Because absolutely, once you have an opening, everybody will take advantage of it. So that's my suggestions to you. Grab a PowerShell book, grab a Python book. I don't care which one it is. Both are valuable. Both you will gain knowledge from. You'll be able to use a lot of the knowledge you learned on one to be able to use the other. That's just the way scripting works. There is a lot of overlap there. Certainly, it's not letter by letter overlap. It's not like every command is the same between them, but there's enough in the style and the method that you can very easily move from one scripting type to another. Once you know it, you know it. Kind of a scenario. Other ideas. Let's see what else we got. Let's keep going through the list and see what other things we might be able to find. This is a good one. You're probably not going to like my answer on this one. But let me discuss this one from Rob that says, do you believe there should be any concern in the future development of AI when it comes to jobs/careers throughout IT? If so, which areas do you believe would be impacted? No, there is not any way, at least in its current form, of what we are very weirdly calling AI, which really is not AI, but we're sort of calling it that because it's the closest that most people have seen to AI. But this automation or way to grab and format data in an automated way, which is not intelligent, it's just a database of information it's pulling from, doesn't seem to have any effect on jobs, careers, or what we've seen in IT at this point. It's had no effect whatsoever. This is very similar to when Apple introduced the iPad, and first everybody made fun of the name. Oh, this is going to be a loser. I love our industry sometimes. That's never going to fly. Who's going to use a tablet? Who's going to buy one of these things and just have a tablet that they're going to drag around with her? Oh, everyone? Oh, it turns out everybody does want to use that tablet. Okay, sorry. Same idea with AI. They all showed up and said, this is the end of it. In fact, everybody said, we're all going to be carrying around tablets. Nobody's even going to use a computer anymore. There's no need for computers. Oh, what? There's a cloud? See, the cloud is here. We're never going to need computers anymore. We're not going to need a help desk. The IT department's going to go away. Nobody's going to have a job in technology because it's all in the cloud and it's all using AI. Well, you could see through the years, the gloom and doom of the industry pundits has resulted in nothing. None of it has come to fruition. None of it has actually happened. Now, there are certainly concerns about AI as it is related to intellectual property, as it is focused on maybe coding and other things that you might find. There is certainly some automation that what we're calling AI today brings to the table, but getting rid of jobs and careers in IT, we're nowhere close to that today. It's certainly not in our lifetime. We're not anywhere near being able to do that because if you've ever used any of the current AI, it's not very good. It's not good at all. And that's good from that perspective. Now, will it get better to do certain things? Can it make graphics? Can it create a scene? or a movie or simulate someone's voice. Yes, it is. It's getting better and better at doing those things. But by the way, creating a picture, having it create its own movie, or having it sound like somebody else's name, is that something you feel that's going to affect your ability to hold a job in IT? Because I think I'm pretty good there. I think we're fine as far as that's concerned. So no, we're nowhere near that right now. There's no worries in my mind about AI. Use what you can today with the functionality it brings to be able to help prompt you for different things that you might want to learn. But what I have found when doing that with AI, it is remarkably incorrect, just wrong, just dead wrong on many things. The one I always like, and people have said this, no, I'm going to use the AI online to ask me questions from the exam or to explain an exam objective. Now, if you go into the AI and have it do that, very often its explanation is just not even correct, or it tries to give you some description that's easy to understand. And in the process of dumbing down the technology, it effectively loses the context and is now explaining to you something that doesn't actually apply to the technology you're trying to make easier to understand. The answer is it's just not very good. It's not good at all right now. So I don't think we got a problem now working through those pieces. So take that for what it's worth. And what do I know? I'm just some guy on the internet. So what if next week we none of us have jobs? Well, I don't think that's a problem. But what do I know? I could be wrong kind of scenario, like we all are. But given what we've seen in the past, I don't think I am. I think we're in pretty good shape here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be hiring anyone right now. We're in pretty good shape. Other questions. We are at the top of the hour. We're going to keep going, though, with at least another couple questions and make this work. Let's archive that. Put some things out of the way. Oh, I have one up on the screen. We'll archive that. Other questions we have. Feel free to submit questions in the Vevox app and working through them. Other folks are even saying, "Oh, wait, isn't open? Wasn't that Chat GPT? Isn't that AI?" It's not. I mean, it tries to be. It's getting close. They're working on it, but it's not AI. It's not really intelligent in the way that it works. You can fool it way too easily. You can tell it things and poison it way too easily. It's not very good. I like that they're referring to it as AI because it's very marketable when you do that. Notice that suddenly that came out and then every company had an AI solution. Like, we make lollipops. Here's our AI solution. Like, you make candy. Why are you doing AI? Because the stockholders like it. And we're going to say we have an AI solution. Well, that doesn't help me. Really, it doesn't. It doesn't do much for you at all. So no, I don't believe OpenGPT or ChatGPT is a true form of AI because it is not. And they will tell you it is not. Even they admit, no, it's not really AI. It's something that seems to have a feel that could be similar to something that would be legitimately AI, but it's not AI. I mean, they kind of wind around there in their description of what it does. Okay, other questions. More other people are sending me notes in about, because let's go back to that question I answered about, is it possible to be infected with malware just by opening your mail? It is not. The same thing applies to things like WhatsApp. Can you get infected by opening a chat message in WhatsApp? You cannot. Can you get infected by clicking a link that a stranger sent you on WhatsApp? Absolutely. In fact, you probably are, if that's what you did, because that's all that comes across WhatsApp is the scammers trying to get you to click a link to then infect whatever it is you're on. So yeah, you can get infected that way, but you have to click something. They can't just send you a text message and then boom, you're infected, because we probably wouldn't use the app if that was the case. Now, of course, I'll give you that disclaimer that what if somebody somewhere someday finds a vulnerability in WhatsApp that causes arbitrary code to be executed when a particularly formed chat message is sent to a user. Okay, it could, but to this date, we have not found a situation where that has occurred. So there you go. There's your disclaimer. Could it happen? Yes, but that could happen with anything. Could happen with WhatsApp. Could happen with Chrome. Could happen with starting Windows. It could happen with anything. But it doesn't, because it's so unusual and so rare, and it takes such a set of circumstances for that to occur. So just don't click links and you're fine. Don't click those links. Don't trust anybody sending you anything online in any way, in any app. Forget it. Don't trust. Your goal is to have a very strong distrust of all humans around the world. It's such a negative term. I don't want to be that negative with it. Just don't trust stuff that you're seeing pop up as a link. You know, if you think you know where to go, you should go to your browser, type it in manually. Type in google.com manually. Type in gmail.com manually. Type it in manually, and you'll get to the right site. These days, you can't even Google it and think you're going to the right site. The attackers have managed to get their illegitimate pages indexed in Google, and in some cases ranked higher than the legitimate sites. So you really can't even trust Google anymore. You really have to look at the URL or type it in yourself very closely to know if you're clicking the right site. Okay, let's do one more to get this party going and working through the details. This is a good one to kind of, I think, bounce off of. This is from Chris, who says nice things. Professor Messer, you're the GOAT. That's bad. Thank you so much for helping me pass my Security Plus exam. Well, I just gave you the tools. You're the one that passed. I passed it on the 5th. They score 772. Strong numbers. Strong numbers. Chris says, now let's finally get a tech job. Yes, now's the time to do it. He says, not too bad for a guy working at McDonald's making Big Macs, who also has his A+, his CCNA, and now his Security Plus. You are well overqualified for working behind that counter. It is time to move up. And as someone who, my first job, or one of my very first jobs, was working out in the field, holding a hoe and getting rid of weeds out at a dairy. I've worked in retail in a video rental store. Some of you have no idea what that is. Those of you that do, it was a real retail job. And working through those, you know, like you're working towards something bigger. You're working towards, you don't know what that is yet, but you know it's going to be better than where you are. Mine was movie gallery. There's Blockbuster folks in the chat. Solidarity, my brother. Mine was movie gallery. The sort of the redhead stepchild of a Blockbuster. But we liked it nonetheless. We had a good time. The parts that I find are most important when you're in these situations is knowing that there's something better that you're working towards. And Chris has that right there on the screen. He's like, I got this. I got my A+, I got my CCNA, and I got my Security Plus. You got a good mix there. So now it's time to use that mix. And if you know people that you have met on the job, because you meet people coming into McDonald's all the time, there's regulars that come in, you start to know where they work. Maybe they're working across the street at this company. You see their badges, and you can ask them, hey, are you guys hiring for tech? You know anybody who needs entry-level tech, help desk? I'm ready to go. You can kind of meet them and ask them. Same thing, if you don't have a LinkedIn already, get your LinkedIn up and running. Connect with as many people as you can there. Start putting down in LinkedIn and matching your certificates to what's in LinkedIn. Have all of those things working together. Ask people you know at church, if you go to Cisco user groups, to Microsoft user groups, ask people there if they're hiring. Always have a resume ready to go that you can email to someone, point them to a link to a Dropbox where your resume happens to be. You know, use whatever you can to market yourself. Now you have to become the marketing guru. You're now the technical guy. Now you have to be the marketing guy, and you have to now explain to people how you're ready to go to work for them and make it happen. And I got to tell you, nothing is more motivating than coming off of a job in retail and moving into IT. That's a very motivating thing to want to do. When I was working out in the field in 90-degree weather with a hoe all day, and you're just hoeing, I'm thinking this cannot be what I do for the rest of my life. It's very motivating, gives you that drive, that fire that you can think, I just need to get out and get a degree and get a certification, do all these other things so I can get that job and do the next thing. You've got all the tools. You've got all of the drive. You've got your A+, your CCNA, your Security Plus. You can answer any questions they're going to ask you and working through those. And I think if you are driven that hard towards making that happen, you're well on your way. Now you just need to figure out your in. That very first foot in the door in IT is so important. I was having an email conversation with someone just this week where they were saying, hey, there's an opportunity for me to get a job. There's an opening at my local Best Buy where I could be on the Geek Squad. Now, that is the sort of the expectation of entry-level IT right there. That is the norm for entry-level technology is Geek Squad. But as I mentioned, it's going to be kind of combines the best of both worlds, isn't it? Retail and IT right there. So if you wanted the best of both of those, there you go. It's a job where you're doing a lot with many different operating systems. You're having to fix hardware. You're having to resolve operating system problems. You're a little bit of a salesperson. There's a little bit of everything in that mix. And it's as you will find, go to the Best Buy or the Geek Squad subreddit. There's a Geek Squad subreddit, and they talk about being on the Geek Squad. But almost all of them talk about going and making things happen. In fact, the chat room saying, don't waste your time on Geek Squad. They're horrible. It's a foot in the door. Every entry-level position in IT is not ideal. Find me an ideal entry-level position. They don't exist because you're either working for a company that is driving you with crazy hours, like if you're working for a service provider, maybe you've got tons of different things you have to learn across many different customers, and they're pushing. You constantly have phone calls you're having to take. Corporate environments have their own challenges with things that you have to learn. Geek Squad, though, the goal with any of these entry-level positions like Geek Squad is you want to be the sponge. You want to learn as much as you can. And in that case, that kind of job teaches you a lot in a very short period of time. Now, the one thing you will find, and that's why I said you should go look at the Geek Squad subreddit on reddit.com. The reason I say that is a lot of the posts there are people that are leaving Geek Squad. A lot of them are people that are earning their badge at Geek Squad, who are proving themselves there. And it's an interesting cycle, and I think it's probably normal for that particular position. As you get in, you learn a bunch of stuff, you become an expert in the things they need you to know about. Maybe you do a little bit of extra work there, but in about a year or two, you're cycling out of there and you're moving to a higher level technology job. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to get your foot in the door, to really get battle hardened with technology, to really become very familiar with troubleshooting Windows and troubleshooting macOS. Trust me, after a year, somebody says, hey, I got this error. It says to blah, 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 blah. Oh, you need to change your registry setting. There's a registry setting to fix that. Just fix that right there. Or I'm getting a message on my screen that says the hardware acceleration, oh, it's a problem with the NVIDIA driver. You need to update to this version. Like, you'll know it. Like, it'll be just second nature to you. People want those skills. And so you'll work in that job, and it has its good parts and it has its bad parts, but it's entry level, and it's, the pay is not fantastic, and maybe you don't like your boss, or maybe you do like your boss, but you never know. It's always that difficult situation. So eventually you will work yourself out of that job. That's normal IT, by the way. That is your normal mode of operation in IT. Generally, we refer to this as the 3-year rule, where you start working for a company, you know nothing about what they do or very little, and then you just keep learning and working there in that IT department. And after about 3 years, you've become kind of an expert in your area, Well, at that point, it's time to either move up to a different department within your organization, or perhaps it's time to move to a different organization. But after about 3 years or so is the time where a lot of people make that move for no other reason than to move up. Now you keep leveling up in IT. And this happens whether you start at Best Buy and the Geek Squad, whether you start at a managed service provider, whether you start in a corporate help desk, whether you start as a field service technician. These are all very common entry-level jobs. And you will start in one of these types of jobs because that's where you start, but you need to get in that job. If you have an opportunity, go take it. Get your foot in the door, because getting that first job in IT is so difficult because you're trying to prove you know the technology, that you know you can do the job. Every job after that in IT, you don't have to prove yourself anymore. It's kind of weird, actually. We spend so much time trying to prove ourselves. Prove. And then once you get past that point, now it's more niche-y. Now people are going to ask you, oh, we'd like you to be our server administrator. So we need you to have very specific knowledge about Windows Server and Active Directory. Okay. Well, that's very different than having to know everything in the world and somehow answer questions. Now I need to know everything about these two things. And you're focusing in on that niche. Then you want to make another move. You think, well, I want to do some networking. Okay, well, you need to know as much as you can about the protocols that we use in Ethernet, about Cisco switches, Cisco routers, or whatever brand they're using. Okay, well, now I need to know those 3 things. Well, that's 3 years of your life. Those don't come easy. You know, those things they're asking you about are not simple things that you could just simply go home for the weekend and read about and you come back the next day and you're done. You have to really apply yourself to learn these things. You have to apply yourself over an extended period of time. Then after that 3 years, you think, I'm ready to move up into security. And you find a job where they want somebody who understands Windows and Linux and networking and protocols and Cisco routers. But now you also need to know about Palo Alto Networks firewalls, the intrusion prevention functionality, the cloud-based malware detection, the SSL VPN, the IPsec functionality. So they keep adding to this. And then you have to continue to learn those pieces of information, which will take you another 3 years or more. I worked for Palo Alto Networks for 7 years because, well, it was fun. It was a great job, but there was so much to learn. I walked in every day being able to answer questions about the technology and to almost the same degree tell people I did not know the answer to that question. Every day, there were things asked of me I did not know. You think, wait, are we supposed to know everything? No, there's no way you can know everything. There's no possible way a human being can know everything there is to know about anything. So we relied on each other. Whenever I had a question about a topic, I would reach out to the other systems engineers that I had on my team. So I'd call the guy in Boston. I'd call the guy in Denver. I'd call the lady in California. I'd call around. Hey, I'd send them an email. Have you ever heard of anything like this? They go, yeah, I think I have. Let me go through my things. I have a customer doing something like that. And they were able to provide me for these and be able to answer that question for me. And then I could go back to my customer and say, I am so much smarter now because I talked to Teresa, the tech in California, and here's what she told me and gave me a little diagram, and look at this. And it does exactly what we want to do. I've already tested it. It works fine, and we should do this. So that's where the fun part comes for me. It's the puzzle. It's the Rubik's Cube of technology that you have to somehow be that person that puts all the colors back together again. Or you have to somehow find out why this weirdness is occurring at random times of the day and what is causing it. How can we resolve it? You have to be the one to make that happen. And as long as you are willing to constantly be curious, constantly be the problem solver, constantly try to fix the puzzle, solve the puzzle that you have in front of you, you have a long career in IT ahead of you that ultimately, as I've always said, provides you with upward mobility, with flexibility, with more control over your own life, over your own finances, and the sky really is the limit. You can do as much as you want, as many times as you would want to do those things. It's available for you to just go out there and grab. You just have to apply yourself and just keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, make connections with everybody you can meet, add them to your LinkedIn, keep the conversations going. One of the best things you can always do is say, I don't know, but we can learn it together. And trust me, that will take you a long way in your IT career. You do not have to be the smartest one in the room. At least you have to be the smartest one in the room, but that doesn't mean you know everything. The smartest person in the room is the one that says, I don't know, but let's go find out. So that's my perspective anyway. Maybe that gives you an idea and some motivation, and just to let you know that you're working hard today. You're behind the counter. You are making it happen at the McDonald's, but this is just a stepping stone for you. You have already built the foundation that's going to give you up to the next level, get you in the door with IT. Now it's just a matter of time. It's about applying yourself. It's about getting your resumes out there. It's about updating your LinkedIn. Have a strategy. You're so good at strategies now. I don't think you're going to have any problem putting together a strategy on how you can get a job in IT in your particular geography. And as long as you keep that perspective, sky really is the limit. All right. Well, I think that's a great place to stop. We've kind of hit the max on our time frame here. I know that Mrs. Professor Messer's probably wondering where I am right now. So we'll have to catch up with her and see what's going on. I want to thank you all for being here. We love doing these live streams. We could not do them without you. And we love having you here and having the chats go by. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. Check in with us next week. Next Wednesday, we have our Network Plus study group where we do the same thing we just did, except all with content that comes from the Network Plus exam objectives. It's already been written. I finished it up yesterday. The questions are here. We just now need for next week to get here, and we'll do another one of these. Always a good time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your ongoing support. This is tons of fun for us, and we hope it's been helpful for you as well. Best of luck on your Core 2 endeavors. Thanks for being here. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. Thanks, everybody.